The recent ongoing Adventist health study reports that 8% of Adventist respondents are vegan. That is not good enough. It's just not. Disease has grown so rampant that even raising these animals is dangerous to our health. A century ago, Ellen White warned that there will soon be no safety in the possession of flocks or herds. Counsels on Diets and Foods, page 414. 75 years ago, my grandfather was a dairy farmer and an Adventist. But to still be an Adventist rancher or dairy farmer today is to ignore God's will. Now, I used to believe that since I ate no meat, I was free from causing cruelty, and therefore I was off the hook from all of this stuff. But in those days, I still ate eggs and was dismayed to learn how laying hens are treated. In cages 2 feet square, up to 9 full-size hens are jammed. They cannot spread a single wing. Their feathers are rubbed off, and soon they have open sores. In such crowds, cannibalism becomes common, so every hen has her beak sliced off to cause her intense pain when she pecks at another. Of course, all the male chicks are immediately killed by the millions. The ammonia buildup in the warehouses from their droppings is so bad that workers must wear gas masks when they enter these sheds, but the hens are forced to breathe it 24 hours a day. Wire floors are not good for chicken feet, and often their growing toenails become enmeshed in the wire and they never free them again. If they are near their food, they survive. Come slaughter time, when their egg-laying rate slows, they are so violently removed from their cages that often feet and partial legs can be found in the empty cages, still attached to the wire floor. If you want to know what it's like to be an egg-laying hen, try this test. Get in a normal-sized car in a closed garage and bring 7 or 8 other people with you. After everybody has squeezed in, lock the doors and never leave again until you are removed to be killed. That's the life of a battery hen today. I have a simple equation that I use now whenever I'm tempted to have an egg. 1 egg equals 22 hours. 22 hours is the average time between each egg laid by a battery hen. 22 hours of absolute, unrelenting misery of an intelligent, helpless, suffering creation of God. 1 hard-boiled egg equals 22 hours. A couple fried, 44. A large quiche or an omelet is worth days of suffering, all contained on 1 plate. God's dominion or Satan's dominion? And be wary of cage-free labels. That usually just means the hens are kept in a dark shed with all the same overcrowding and ammonia problems of regular farms. Standards are loose and deception common. A tiny outdoor extension qualifies as free range. It rarely means a grassy yard. Don't forget the standard procedure of cutting off their beaks and forced molting to maintain egg laying. What about the older hens who lay less? They are usually sent to a slaughter like all the rest. And even if the hens are well treated, what about the useless males? They are destroyed without mercy. Cage-free does not mean cruelty-free. A backyard flock is about the only way that you can truly avoid chicken cruelty. Everything else is a marketing ploy. Sport hunting and fishing. For thousands of years, much of people's food has been obtained by hunting and fishing. But with modern farming, hunting is now mainly for sport. There is no stronger indictment of the way we treat animals than that we kill them purely for fun and entertainment. Desire of Ages, page 356 to 357. Satan's hatred against God leads him to hate every object of the Savior's care. He seeks to mar the handiwork of God, and he delights in destroying even the dumb creatures. A better definition of sport hunting and fishing could not be written. Hundreds of millions destroyed every year in the U.S. alone, all for trophies and bragging rights. Safaris that kill one of every different species to have each variety of horns. To make it more fun, many hunters use as inefficient a weapon as possible. Bow and arrow users lose half of the deer that they shoot. Those that escape end up dying by themselves from blood loss, infection, or from the arrow penetrating deeper to a vital organ. State wildlife agencies build up game species for hunters at the expense of all other wildlife. North American hunters cause an average of 1,100 human injuries per year and around 100 human deaths per year. Humans are dying due to the bloodlust of hunters far more than from wild animals. In fact, all North American human deaths by wild animals only average a third of hunter-caused deaths. A rich dentist with a rifle is a far greater threat to your life than any bear, cougar, shark, or snake. And then there's sport fishing, which is merely hunting for fish. Now remember, fish are vertebrates with a nervous system like ours that feels pain just like our nervous system does. Now, they don't show it like other animals because we can't hear the sounds that they make without special equipment. Fish have the same social lives and emotional feelings as all other vertebrate animals. In South Africa, an aquarium had an Aranda goldfish named Big Red. Now, into Big Red's tank was put a severely deformed Moor goldfish named Blackie. Now, Blackie could barely swim or move around the tank. From the start, this was sensed by Big Red, and Big Red took it upon himself to be Blackie's friend. Big Red would pick Blackie up on his back and help him move around the tank to wherever he needed to go. When food was sprinkled onto the surface, Big Red would get underneath him and carry him up to the surface where they both could feed together. Now, at the time that this story was reported, this had been going on for over a year. A year! This is altruism, the giving to others with no thought of reward, being shown from a small fish on a continuing basis. But no regard is ever given to fish, and the worst tortures are heaped upon them so that we can relax and enjoy the outdoors. The fish hooks we use rip into their mouths with the same intensity that a nail would feel in our mouths. They use their mouth to examine their surroundings since they have no hands or paws. Often hooked fish lose their ability to eat until their gaping wounds heal. Fish lose their protective coat of mucus by being handled by humans. Without it, they are susceptible to bacteria and waterlogged tissues, both of which can be fatal. Many fish are so exhausted from fighting the fisherman's line that when released, they go into shock for hours and are easily caught by predators. Various studies have found that a hooked fish removed from the water for only 60 seconds and then returned alive has a 43 to 72% mortality rate. No one can tell me that it is more humane to catch and release when you have that high a mortality rate of the fish being released. That's like saying that a mugger is humane for not killing his victim, if he only beats the victim senseless. That must make the mugger a true sportsman. Those not thrown back slowly die by drowning in air. Sometimes it takes well over an hour. I have watched fish being skinned alive as they struggled. Our casual acceptance of cruelty to fish because they look and act different from other animals is based largely on our emotional attachments to animals that seem more like us. When our pleasure causes others pain, we fit the description of the pre-flood inhabitants found in Patriarchs and Prophets, page 92. They delighted in destroying the life of animals, and the use of flesh for food rendered them still more cruel and bloodthirsty, until they came to regard human life with astonishing indifference. Now, please understand that what I'm discussing here is not part of a political agenda or the regular environmental issues usually discussed in our society. Many meat-eating, hunting, fishing environmentalists would be quite unhappy by the subjects I'm discussing. This is why I do not consider myself an environmentalist, because the standard for protecting animals among environmental groups is at a low level, when the biblical level is actually much higher. And I will stand with inspiration rather than what people say in the world. Now, we need to very much be careful about what we're doing. We must examine each of our practices with animals to see if we are following God's dominion or Satan's dominion, and take steps to change things if wrong is being done. Mrs. White had much to say about the North's responsibility for the Civil War. Testimonies, Volume 1, page 359. God is punishing the North, that they have so long suffered the accursed sin of slavery to exist. The North did not have slaves, but they allowed slavery to continue to exist and were punished accordingly. God holds us responsible if we allow wrong to continue by our silence and apathy. To say it's not our problem is to shirk our God-given duty. Animals we wear. Mammals used for fur are killed in two ways. First are those raised on farms such as mink, foxes, chinchilla, even dogs and cats. They spend their short, miserable lives crowded into wire cages, unprotected from the weather, until they are killed by electrocution, strychnine, gas, or having their necks broken. Second are those caught in the wild with leg-hold traps. Traps catch anything that touches them: pet dogs and cats, songbirds, deer. For every fur animal caught in a trap, 2 so-called trash animals are killed by the trap and thrown away. Animals caught remain for hours or days until the trapper returns. Some chew off their leg and bleed to death elsewhere. The returning trapper does not want to damage the pelt, so they club, crush, or stomp the trapped animal to death. Around the world, most cat species are now endangered due to the fur industry. Seals and kangaroos are slaughtered endlessly. All of this bloodshed for luxury coats, fur-lined gloves, knickknacks, and trivial souvenirs. Sales of jacket trim are one of the main reasons the fur industry survives, because people think that just a little fur is okay. Alligator shoes, ostrich skin wallets, bear skin rugs, and other forms of exotic leather and fur represent massive cruelty. 40 million fur bearers, plus uncountable non-target trash animals killed worldwide every year for nothing at all but fashion and appearance. Is this God's dominion or Satan's dominion? Our companion animals. We lavish millions of dollars upon our pets, give them the best of attention and love until we grow tired of them. If they become inconvenient or too expensive, then we dispose of them. Some people set them free at campgrounds, rest areas, in forests and towns. Hardly any of these will survive. Most of these will die from disease, starvation, and being hit by cars. Those that live eke out a slim living. For every human being born in this country, 7 dogs and cats are born, and there is nowhere for all of them to go. Now, that is actually a huge improvement from just a few decades ago when too many people let their pets breed aimlessly. But pounds are still killing 2 to 4 million abandoned dogs and cats every year. These deaths occur when we do not spay and neuter our pets, and because we allow animal breeding puppy mills to continue to exist. Are we fulfilling our God-given duty of stewardship toward our most loyal friends? And there are many wild animals made into pets that would just as soon not be. Reptiles and parrots and fish can be treated humanely but still be unhappy. Stuck in small cages or tanks with nothing interesting to do, they are far removed from their wild homes. In fact, most tropical fish captured for the pet trade are caught using cyanide. This kills many non-target fish outright and poisons their coral reef home. With so many dogs and cats and other domestic animals dying for lack of a home, do we really need to take healthy animals from their God-given homes in the wild? Experimenting on animals for science. Now, in the past, it was taught that the best way to learn about human anatomy and the theory of evolution was to dissect non-human animals. But modern alternatives have made such dissection obsolete. Because of dissection, many wild populations of frogs, sharks, salamanders, reptiles, fish, and birds have been slaughtered. We must not devalue life by killing just because it's convenient. Dissection is literally a dead-end education. We should teach the most important lesson of all, the respect for life. One area we need to examine is whether we can cause animal suffering to save human life. This is important and needs careful thought. Is experimentation on animals a justified practice? First, we need to note that we experiment all the time on humans to test new products. These are called clinical tests, and they involve only volunteers. We must always remember that animals in tests are never volunteers. They have no choice. So we must strive very hard to limit such tests to only the absolutely crucial. We cannot cause their suffering for trivial, repetitive, or useless tests. We must evaluate animal research on a case-by-case basis to determine its worth. A major area of animal research involves cosmetic testing. Dozens of rabbits per test are enclosed in metal boxes with only their heads protruding. Then various substances are poured into their eyes to see how much damage is done. Go into your bathroom or laundry and try to find any product that hasn't been tested in this way. Unless you have been carefully buying humane products, you will be very disappointed. Bleach, hairspray, shampoo, mascara, and detergent are all being used to blind rabbits in pointless tests. The companies that continue these tests say that it is for public safety and because the tests are required by law. That is a lie. No law requires it, and hundreds of companies that never test on animals prove it. Results of cosmetic tests are only valid on the animal species they were performed on. To help humans, tests would need to show the exact amount of the substance required to injure a human being, which these tests never show. Every time we buy a product from a company that tests on animals, we are saying to them, "It's all right to do this. You don't need to change. Here's some more money to blind rabbits." We are making it possible for suffering to continue by our buying choices. Modern alternative tests that do not use animals and are as accurate or better than animal tests are readily available, but companies will not switch until we force them to by our wallets. The second area that I'm going to mention is in the area of drug testing. Is it helpful to test drugs and chemicals on animals to make sure that they are safe? A government study was conducted on every new drug marketed over a 10-year period. The study found that half of the drugs were relabeled or withdrawn because they were found to be more dangerous on people than the animal tests had shown. A pesticide that was proven safe using animal tests was DDT. But overwhelming evidence of decades proved how lethal DDT is to animals and the entire food web. Animal research can often be used as a wax nose to prove whatever the researcher wishes. Government agencies using animal tests have been proving for years that cigarettes are addictive and harmful. Meanwhile, tobacco-run animal tests have been proving for years that cigarettes are not addictive or harmful. Many such tests prove whatever the researcher wants them to prove. We need to understand that animal research is a faulty method of gathering information that actually costs human lives, since each animal species reacts differently to various tests. About 50 years ago, researchers decided that there might be promise in an extract from the Pacific yew tree in treating cancer. So they infected healthy animals with cancer and then used the extract to treat them. Now, no result occurred. There was no improvement. The scientists decided the extract was useless and abandoned it. Now, Pacific yew tree is a small, scraggly, understory tree that only grows in the Pacific Northwest. Lumbermen dislike it because it is worthless for timber, and they usually cut and burn it. Here's a photo of a yew tree that was started growing in 1865, showing how small they stay even after a century of growth. Now, eventually, scientists decided to try again with the yew extract, but this time they used clinical human tests instead of animals. The results were shocking. The extract was extremely effective on certain cancers. In fact, it was the most promising treatment in ages. But now there was a serious problem. For decades, lumbermen had been wastefully destroying yews as a trash tree. It was hard to find enough trees to provide the extract. So two drastic consequences resulted from our faith in animal testing. First, a real treatment of the cancer patients was delayed for decades. Second, For all that time, the main source of the treatment was allowed to be foolishly destroyed instead of being used. How many other life-saving drugs have been lost to us in this way? In this U case, our reliance upon animal tests has actually cost human life. We must ask ourselves if animal testing truly saves human life, and if not, then why is it allowed to continue? Reforming our attitude toward animals. We need a new perception of the other animals from that which we have inherited. We lavish attention, time, and money on our cats and dogs. Pets are wonderful. Everyone loves kittens and puppies, but beyond them things change. Cows and chickens are for eating. That's what God made them for. Ducks and moose are here to be hunted. The only possible purpose of a fish is to be impaled upon a hook. All predators are pure evil and must be eradicated. The only good snake is a dead snake. We think animals are beautiful in pictures and nature films, but let them do anything that causes us the slightest inconvenience, and the first solution proposed is to kill them. We marvel at the colors of a beautiful butterfly and unthinkingly squash every moth that we can find, when in reality moths are virtually identical to butterflies. For woe unto any animal that doesn't meet with our standard of beauty. Everyone knows all about bats and spiders, octopus and snakes. They are ugly, so they must be bad. The reality is that most people know next to nothing about such animals, and what they do know is 95% nonsense. Test yourself. True or false? Bats fly into people's hair and suck blood from your neck. Tarantulas swarm onto people, biting them to death. Snakes leap out of trees to strangle people. Octopus pull swimmers down to their death. All of the answers are of course false, as are hundreds of other stories that I'm sure we're all familiar with. Stories created hundreds of years ago to scare people are passed on as gospel truth from generation to generation. Until we throw away the myths, we will never appreciate animals for what they really are, living, breathing, feeling creations of God, with their own lives and purposes in God's plan. We may not understand that purpose, and in fact it may have nothing directly to do with us, but that in no way negates the importance of it. As an illustration of our thoughtlessness in caring for the animal creation entrusted to our dominion, we need only look at the thousands of animal species currently threatened with extinction. We know of hundreds of species that have already been destroyed by human activity. We have no idea how many more are being lost before we even know they exist. And once they are gone, we can never get them back, no matter how much we may want to. Are there any solutions? Now, obviously, what I have described being done to the animals is terrible, but what can we do about it? Now, I'm not asking you to go out and picket McDonald's. I'm not asking you to join every animal protection group. What I am asking is for us to look inside each one of our lives and determine whether or not we are supporting cruelty in any way. Now, this is something that we often feel helpless to stop wrongs being done, but we actually have more influence than we realize. In this presentation, I have very, very carefully chosen only those issues that we can alter by our actions. There are 3 steps that we can all take to save the lives of animals. Number 1, never directly cause an animal to die. Now, this is obvious for hunting and fishing, but it is just as deadly for meat and fur. Every time we buy any fur or ivory or meat, we directly cause animals to die. Don't kill that snake. It's not out to get you. There is never any justification to ever kill any non-venomous snake in North America, and only the most unusual and extreme cases should venomous ones be killed. They are vitally important to the ecosystem in which they live and only use their venom for 2 reasons: to catch food and to defend themselves. Leave them alone, and they will leave you alone. Find non-lethal solutions to animals that bother you in your backyard. This should be always dealt with humanely, and death should never be the first option. Number 2, indirect killing. Never indirectly cause an animal to die. Now, this can be found in situations like buying milk and eggs, cosmetics and toothpastes tested on animals, animals from a pet store. All of these cases, we allow and fund these sorts of abuse to continue by our buying actions. When we visit places like marine parks and rodeos that exploit and abuse animals, we make it profitable for them to continue to exist. Most animal abuse exists only because it's profitable. When people stop giving money to the abusers, the suffering and death will stop. And don't say that you're only one person and can't have any impact. A vegetarian saves the lives of hundreds of animals by his food choices. As with spreading the gospel, our task is to help save the individual, not to look at the unsaved billions and give up. Number 3, educate others of what is going on. Tell your families and friends what you've learned. Express how much these things bother you. Laboratory experimentation continues only because the majority of people are unaware of what really is happening behind the tightly closed doors of the lab. Abuse thrives on secrecy. If we would adopt these 3 steps, we would save countless lives. We as individuals can make a difference if we will only make the effort. It is our duty and responsibility as God's caretakers of His creation. And victories are being won every day. Since I first started preaching on this subject many years ago, huge improvements have been made in many areas. Far fewer pets are killed in pounds now. Thanks to the efforts of dedicated activists, far fewer whales are being killed because Japanese rogue pirates are no longer allowed to act with impunity. Students now have choices when it comes to dissection that they can choose from, and chimpanzees are finally being removed from laboratory prisons. Substitutes are easily available for every meat and dairy product. Many countries are banning cosmetic testing. Scientific books have been written proving that fish feel pain. Rattlesnake roundups are being phased out, and some factory-farmed animals have been given more room. All of these victories only happened because enough people finally demanded change by their voice and their buying choices. We are not faced with the false choice of helping animals or people, since helping one usually helps both. Change never happens without struggle, but it is happening. Envoy. As long as we allow or participate in hurting animals, we will forever come short of Christ's admonition in Matthew 5:48. Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. We cannot have the character of God when we are tainted with cruelty. We, as followers of Christ, are to be an example to the world and universe of His law working in His people's lives. When we fulfill the dominion principle, we will have taken one more step toward that goal. In this presentation, I've shown our responsibility to animals and the ways in which we have mishandled it. I very much condensed what could have been said, since books have been written on virtually every subject mentioned. But it can be summed up further yet in one brief passage by Ellen White. Everything I've talked about today is embraced by this one statement. It is found in Patriarchs and Prophets, pages 442 to 443, after Balaam had beaten his donkey. Balaam had given evidence of the spirit that controlled him by his treatment of his beast. A righteous man regardeth the life of his beast, but the tender mercies of the wicked are cruel. Few realize, as they should, the sinfulness of abusing animals or leaving them to suffer from neglect. He who created man made the lower animals also, and his tender mercies are over all his works. The animals were created to serve man, but he has no right to cause them pain by harsh treatment or cruel exaction. It is because of man's sin that the whole creation groaneth and travaileth together. Suffering and death were thus entailed, not only upon the human race, but upon the animals. Surely, then, it becomes man to seek to lighten, instead of increasing, the weight of suffering which his transgression has brought upon God's creatures. He who will abuse animals because he has them in his power is both a coward and a tyrant. A disposition to cause pain, whether to our fellow men or to the brute creation, is satanic. Many do not realize that their cruelty will ever be known, because the poor dumb animals cannot reveal it. But could the eyes of these men be opened, as were those of Balaam, they would see an angel of God standing as a witness to testify against them in the courts above. A record goes up to heaven, and a day is coming when judgment will be pronounced against those who abuse God's creatures. I can add nothing to that, but to ask that we please allow that day to come quickly. For the animals' lives and the vindication of God's character are in our hands. Let us remember the words in Isaiah 11, verse 9, "They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain." When we fulfill what God has told us, we will be defending inspiration.